Stort tack Maria och Josie Bookfair från det här väldigt rafflande arrangemanget direkt från Johannesburg, så ska vi gå vidare till ett arrangemang av Rädda Barnen. Flickor på flykt i södra Afrika. Tusentals unga flickor försöker varje år ta sig till Sydafrika från andra länder i södra Afrika. Vissa flyr krig, konflikter, andra migrerar i hopp om ett bättre liv och utbildning. Riskerna längs vägen är många och väl framme, så väntar ofta en osäker tillvaro. Samtidigt visar en ny rapport från Rädda Barnen att flickor som migrerar i södra Afrika ofta drivs av en stark egen vilja och gör aktiva val för att skapa sig ett bättre liv. Vi kommer nu lyssna till Oskar Kollberg från Rädda Barnen som samtalar med Nyika Mashinjese från Save the Children South Africa och Sara Granat från Rädda Barnen.
Hi and welcome to this talk about girls on the move in southern Africa, and we will start this talk with a short film about one of these girls, Gloria. She's 18 years old and she comes from Congo, Kinshasa.
When I came, I was young, so I just followed my mom's footsteps. It wasn't easy because we had problems with documents. So my brother and I had to stay behind because we got arrested in Zimbabwe. So apparently my mom was told that we will have to stay there until our documents get fixed. It's not easy, but then it's like a responsibility now because I'm a girl, I have that motherhood, and I'll have to take care of my brothers. Well, the good thing about coming here, I would say, it's made me grow, and it's made me know how life works. Because if I was back home, I'll still be under mom's family, and I'll still have to wait for them, and I won't have the courage to speak for me and defend my brothers. So it's built me in a way. And it's also good because I've always wanted to speak English and French because I felt like those are international languages. If I have to work in the media, I should know. I know I'll be a journalist because that's what I want to work in the media and also have a restaurant one day. You need courage, you have to be strong and believe in yourself. That's it.
Yes, hi Sarah, and we will have Nika with us as well pretty soon, I hope. And so Save the Children has compiled a series of reports. There are 4 reports. It's a report from Balkan and Greece, the reports from Central America and Mexico, and on the border between Venezuela and Colombia, as well as the South African region. And the reports are looking on girls on the move in every context. So could you please say why did you see the need to do this kind of research?
Well, it actually started when the Children on the Move advisors from South Africa, from the Save the Children in South Africa, were in Sweden. They were visiting us and looking at how we work with children in migration. They also visited the Swedish domestic program, how we work with refugee children in Sweden. And we had this discussion about the different children that are on the move, and we realized that a lot of concentration is on the boys, because in some contexts the boys are in majority and they're also more visible in the different contexts. And they, as much as we, realize that it's a little bit more difficult to reach the girls a lot of times. So that's when the idea came up to make this study, to actually look closer at where are the girls, why do they leave, what are their routes, what do they encounter on the way, and how could we support them better in our programs.
Okay, and the reports will be launched in around 2 weeks. And
Yep.
so is it anything that had surprised you in the findings of the report?
I think for the Southern Africa region, I think one of the things that surprised me the most was that during the route, a lot of the girls expressed that taxi drivers and truck drivers were people who really helped them along the way. They were sometimes also a risk for them, but a lot of times they actually got, like they would help them across borders, they would give them food, they would hide them inside their trucks, for example, to help them cross borders. And they also knew about, for example, this taxi company is safe to travel with, while these other ones are not safe to travel with. So I think that was an interesting find that one doesn't think so much about, that those people could be someone who could help you along the way, being a girl.
And in this talk, we also have Nika. He's Children on the Move program manager for Save the Children South Africa. Unfortunately, we have some problem with the technical part, but I think you can hear us and we can hear you, Nika. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We just can't see you. That's a shame. But we are happy that you're with us anyway. So, Nika, if you could add to what Sarah just said, was there anything that surprised you in the findings of the report?
Yeah, thank you, Oscar, for that. Definitely, there were very interesting findings that came out in this study. And one of them in particular was to find out that there was a group or network of older women in the communities in the country of destination, particularly in South Africa, who were identified by these girls on the move as a supporting structure, that when they had they needed advice, they needed protection, these women were there as a network of support. That was very interesting for me, and particularly that it actually opened our eyes up that when we program for girls on the move, it's actually important to look out for that kind of network of women to actually strengthen that natural protection that the girls have in the communities that we would have never known if it was not through a study like this.
And can you say a little bit from which countries the girls come from that try to make it to South Africa?
So it's quite a broad network and routes that girls take, but the predominant numbers of children that you find among girls that move to South Africa is girls from countries such as DRC, countries such as Mozambique. Those would have high numbers. Countries such as Zimbabwe would have the highest numbers. Then we have some girls moving from countries such as Burundi. We have girls from countries in the east of Africa, and a few from other surrounding countries like Swaziland. You would have a few girls coming from there, but the predominant ones would be mainly those girls from Mozambique, Malawi as well, I should add, and DRC, Burundi, Zimbabwe. Those are predominantly the higher ones, but you would find children from predominantly most of the countries.
All right. And Sarah, could you say something about the reasons why girls leave their homes trying to make it to South Africa?
So a lot of the girls that were interviewed were talking about violence, which is one of the sort of reasons that came out quite strong. And that can be violence in the home. And in the case of the DRC, for example, it's also the violent conflicts that go on there. So that would be a strong reason for them. But education also stood out as a strong reason for leaving, that they didn't have access to education in their home countries. Education or some way to make a living. So education, work, and to escape different forms of violence was predominant. I don't know if you want to add something there, Nika?
Just a quick one. I think the issue of girls trying to support their families has been one of the biggest reasons why girls move to try and find a livelihood to support their families and earn a living, and also to try and gain education, particularly for those girls that would have never had access to education in their country of origin. Have this desire that if they move, they might be able to go to school. And some of them move also to reconnect with family. So some of them were born and they were told that your parents moved to South Africa and now they have lost contact. They're trying to reconnect with their families. Then they, without knowing how big and vast South Africa is, they just venture into this move and try to find their parents when they get to South Africa, and in most cases realize they can't find them, and then they start living on their own and become separated or unaccompanied in that manner. So those are some of them. And some of them actually come as a result of trafficking. They are trafficked into South Africa for a number of reasons. So those are, I think, in addition to what Sarah has said, particularly abuse in the home, whether it is abuse towards them or abuse towards somebody in the home, maybe the mother is being abused and they escape, or it's a community-based abuse where there's rampant violation of girls in that community, then girls start running away, particularly where there are wars or instability, then they realize they are not safe.
And as we saw in the short film about Gloria, she's traveling without legal documents, and that made her get stuck in Zimbabwe. And are there any like safe ways for girls to migrate to South Africa, would you say, Nika?
Well, the migration system, particularly if I can speak of the asylum and refugee protection system, has safer ways that it's actually a safer way that is agreed at UN level to make sure that traveling for girls is safe, particularly in the case of Gloria, who was running away from instability and war in her country of origin. It was quite important to have that safe passage. But the traveling that girls end up in is very difficult in most cases because the systems of migration have not been highly child sensitized. So it's very difficult for children to navigate the migration system in a safe way without being abused, without being violated, or without being deprived of the right to seek protection. It's there are still quite gaps, but I should say using the asylum system, it should be safe for girls to move between countries. But the major challenge that they face is mode of traveling, how they travel from one country to another with the trucks, with different mode of traveling, and in some cases crossing on irregular crossing pathways, like through the river from one country to another, which is quite dangerous in some cases. But the issue of documentation remains a very big challenge for most of the girls, because when they leave, sometimes they are in a rush, they don't even take a birth certificate, and because the route has been long, they lose documents on the routes, they can't prove their age, and so many things.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we can't see you, Nika. It feels strange to look out in the void when you're speaking. But could you add, Sarah, to what Nika was saying about, you know, what does she face, the migrant girl, during her journey?
Well, what came out in the report is that a lot of girls, obviously, they have what Nika mentioned previously. As much as I mentioned at the beginning, these taxi drivers and truck drivers can be someone who keeps them safe. They are also a danger, so it's double. So a lot of the girls on the way, they encounter that they don't have any means of getting food, of moving forward. So a lot of them end up seeing that there's no other way to move forward than to trade sex for different favors. And so there's a lot of sexual abuse on the way. And they also, obviously, there are violations and there's rape and all those things across the way. And then also some of the girls also spoke about hunger, being hungry for a long time because they couldn't find food. Being cold, as Nika mentioned, crossing dangerous parts. There's one girl in one of the studies who came very young. She was only 7. She tells about how they had to dig themselves under the fence, and that she was very, very scared doing that because it was difficult for them to try and physically cross that border. So there's a lot of things that are, a lot of dangers on the way, both when it comes to abuse from people that they meet, but also a lack of food and somewhere to sleep and all those things.
Yeah, sure. And when they reach the destination, let's say Johannesburg, and let's say they don't have legal documents, they might not even speak the language. What faces them in the new country, so to speak?
Do you want to go ahead, Nika?
Yeah, I can. I think there is a very interesting balance of things and progression around what the girls meet when they get into the country of origin, depending with how they have been identified and found when they arrive. It's quite different. So for those girls that arrive and are able to be identified by the existing safety nets, they are able to be channeled into the care system, which is more protective, which is more allowing them to be children, access school, and all that. But for the majority that are not identified, that are still in the community, are confronted by a mammoth of difficulties, which includes very high levels of abuse. I will give you an example for children that do not have documentation, that they might be molested. And because they don't have documents and they are afraid of being deported or arrested, they end up not even reporting the abuse or the rape that they have faced. And even if they report to their parents will then say, you can't go to the police because then we will be arrested because we don't have documents, we don't have legal permits to be in this country. So they hide those form of molestation that they face. And in most cases as well, due to other policies that still need to be reviewed in South Africa, such as need to pay for health care for asylum seekers, they suffer. Recently we had a child who had a stick stuck in their ear and went to a very big hospital and was told that because she's an asylum, we can't take them into an emergency operation. She has to spend the whole weekend with a stick in the ear until it was reported to Save the Children and were able to pay that bill. And the child was then immediately operated and that stick removed. So those are some of the challenges the girls would meet. But on the other side, we have a progressive social development policies that are also allowing children to be taken into children's homes, in children's care centers, allowed to be put into other forms of alternative care. And some successful court judgments that allow these children to access education even without documentation. So there is progress, but there is a lot of challenge that they face. And they also face risk of trafficking as well.
And going back again to Gloria in the film, we could see it's been a hard time, but now she looked quite bright on her future, and she was like dreaming big about her pursuing a future for herself and her brothers in South Africa. And what would you say, Sarah, because that's also part of the report, seeing girls' resilience?
Yeah, I think that's something that has struck us across all the reports, actually, is that the girls do talk about the hardships, why they left, the difficult journey and all, but when you talk to them about if it was worth it, if getting to where they are now, even when they are still in a quite difficult situation, they are all quite in agreement that they couldn't have done in any other way, that going back wasn't an option, that the possibilities, even being in South Africa, maybe undocumented, they still felt like the possibilities were bigger than if they had stayed home. So it was, for most girls, especially the ones who traveled by themselves, very much a conscious choice. And a lot of them were aware of difficulties, but maybe couldn't quite it was an abstract risk, so to speak. So they were still not quite ready for the risks, obviously, because you can never sort of prepare for abuse and things like that on the way. But also they experienced that they felt that it would have been good to give other type of...
We have Nika with us.
Great, finally.
Excellent.
Towards the end. But that they felt that a lot of people had, especially older relatives, have given them sort of half-truths about the journey. So to sort of encourage them to go, to try to make money and all that. And that they felt would have been better for them to get true information, not to make things seem better than they were, because then they could have prepared themselves better for the arrival. So there's a big difference, for example, for these girls who came quite young, who come often without documentation, as compared to the girls who are older and who were able to prepare a bit more, that maybe already has contacts in South Africa who told them, you know, to bring your birth certificate or even a passport or something like that. That makes a big difference, especially for refugees, for example, in the process of trying to ask for asylum. So there was a lot of things that the girls felt could have been improved, but they still felt like even so they would have still left knowing, and they still felt like, yeah, that being where they were now was better than where they were, because they at least they saw that there were opportunities at least, which was a difference.
And could some of you just say, and Nika, we see you now, we are happy for that. And and could any one of you say a little bit about the girls who come to South Africa and try to go to South Africa? In what? How do they travel? Do they travel by themselves mostly, or with parents or families, or?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. I was going to add that to what the comment that Sarah just made, that some of these girls come with their parents, particularly when they escape from violence, either from countries that are war-torn. They normally come with their mothers. It's normally mothers and children. And in most cases then, the parents, when they settle in South Africa, anything happens to the parents, like for instance, in the case of Gloria, her mother passes away and the parents split, and the children are left alone. And this is then what happens to the children, to become separated or unaccompanied. And some girls come in the company of non-adults that they know from the country of origin, their parents might have died in the country of origin, but there are these adults or neighbors who know them, who then do not leave them behind when they escape or when they travel, and they come with them, but those are children we regard as separated. And in most cases then those children start to live independent lives when they are in South Africa. And some of them, just take a walk. And they hear, for example, when I was saying earlier, some children have been in neighboring countries and they heard that your mother went to South Africa many years ago. And when they face difficulties in life, they think maybe if I find my mother, I'll be okay. They take a journey. We have one child we have documented 2 years ago in South Africa, a young boy who was 11 years old. After being orphaned and abused, he decided to take a walk. He walked for 300 kilometers on foot. He says he walked for 30 days and 1 day. That's how he describes it. And he came to South Africa and some drug dealers helped him cross the border. And that's how he came. So some come with trucks, some are trafficked actually to come to South Africa by other people who promise them employment in South Africa. Come, I will get you a job, or intending to move over from South Africa to another country of destination using South Africa as transit, and when they get here, they get stuck here, and then they continue their life here as separated or unaccompanied children. And these are some of the girls that we then meet with. But some of these girls are actually born here in South Africa, with the parents who then move from other countries for many different reasons. And while they are here, they are born here, and they become either separated or unaccompanied while they are here, or escape abuse within a migrant family in South Africa, then they become separated in that way. But there are quite multiple ways of how these girls end up in South Africa. And some of them are brought as domestic servitude, if I may say. People that come from those countries of origin go back, take these girls to come and work for them, and keep them to work. They work, but they are not paid for the work that they do. They work for being kept at home, having food, or getting shelter. And we refer to that as domestic servitude. And that's quite common. And some of them are taken to come and work in the streets, sell a little bit of sweets and stuff like that, or even to come and help people with disabilities, where they are holding a mother who's blind, assisting them to beg on the robots or things like that, or others are actually used to beg in the streets to earn a living for somebody else. So it's quite a wide range of things that ways how they come to South Africa.
And 6th of October, we will have another talk on Girls on the Move, and then we will talk about all the 4 reports on the global scale. And the same day we will release a podcast on Girls on the Move from South Africa, with interviews with 2 girls from DRC. And they also talk in the podcast about the threats of violence as a migrant in South Africa, and xenophobia as something that is very real to them, which make them more or less not go out for a long time because they are afraid. Can you say something about that, Nika?
Yeah, it's a very sad reality that we face in South Africa. But I should be very quick to say we've been very pleased of late to see initiatives coming from government officials, senior government representatives speaking publicly against actions such as xenophobia, because it is a reality of negative impact in the lives of migrant children, particularly girls. We recently had an initiative to get children send voice notes through the initiative of our project officers in Children on the Move, and children were expressing that these xenophobic attacks creates a lot of fear in them, to the extent that some of them stop going to school for extended months because they are afraid to be identified as migrants, and some of them end up trying to modify how they look, change their accent to try and just not be identifiable as a migrant in the community. And some of them have suffered direct physical attacks. Either their parents have suffered attacks, and that has really instilled a lot of fear in these children. But the psychosocial effect of xenophobia is really a big component of what we focus in as Save the Children in South Africa, to try and help girls cope with this distress and the trauma that the visuals of those violences create in young children's minds. So the impact is quite great and big, and it creates a burden and distress upon children a lot. And it is also an economic impact for children, that for those whose families live, or even the migrant girls who live on selling a few things in the streets, when these things happen, it destroys their livelihoods, and it really makes it difficult for them to live on.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
There, I think that it's very interesting, actually, the work that Save the Children South Africa does with the community dialogues. Because the community dialogues is that colleagues from Save, they go out in different communities where there are children coming in, and they gather sort of different adults of the community that are important stakeholders, and then they have conversations, and they can answer questions, and they talk about why these children are there, what are their needs, and they very much emphasize this need of protection, and that they're children just like other children, and they have the same rights and things like that. So I think that it's a very good initiative to stem xenophobia at a quite early stage in smaller, especially in smaller communities, where you can sort of reach sort of all the important actors of one community with having those dialogues.
And soon we need to, sorry Nika for interrupting, but soon we need to wrap up. But we have just a few questions left. And so the report has been made, and there's been a lot of findings. Will this affect the work on the ground, Save the Children's work for these girls?
I didn't get that question clearly, Oscar. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so how the findings that you have seen in the report, will that affect how you work?
Yeah, definitely, Oscar. You know, the findings of this study has helped us structure how we look at the gender view to the effects of migration and displacement for children. Because it made us realize that looking at these children affected by migration and displacement as a collective group, it misses the specific gender-based needs of the children. So there are programs that needs to be designed that speaks to the challenges that girls face specifically, that boys face specifically, which are different. For example, with the findings of this study, finding that girls normally end up taken into households. That's why we do not greatly find them when we conduct outreach work, and where we find predominantly boys. Girls are taken into households as maids, as servants in the homes, or taken into sexual exploitation. So our programming needs to speak to protecting them in those spaces, particularly engaging households to protect children that may be brought in there, to make sure that they are not underage if they are being employed, and all those kind of things. And also creating livelihoods programs that help empower girls so that they have the agency to live an independent life. Because one of the things that this study found out was that when girls come with those people that assist them to cross the border, those people become their support system. When they run out of money for rent, they go back to those people that have transported them, and then they ask for money, but then they have to pay in exchange with that in becoming a sexual partner to that particular adult now. And those are some of the interventions that if we have livelihoods programming, it would help those girls as they grow to actually have an independent living programs that assist them to be self-sustainable.
Thank you very much. And now we have maybe less than a minute left. So the very last question will be about the consequences of COVID-19 since the border have closed. So if borders are closed, what does it mean if you are in transit or if you're trying to make it to South Africa?
Yeah, COVID-19 was a very big challenge, particularly I was speaking specifically to girls, but generally to all children that are affected by migration. Those who were in transit, tomorrow morning the borders were closed. No one could cross. It means they had to stay where they were trying to escape, and that increased the vulnerability of these children. Some of them, it meant using illegal routes of crossing, which increased their danger to exploitation and abuse and stealing of the properties that they would have, losing of documents that they had, increasing their risk in migration. And also for those that had arrived that were also in the country, in the beginning of COVID, all countries that were responding to COVID immediately responded to support their citizens who were facing challenges. It meant very difficult times for migrants. So a lot of advocacy and engagement had to take place between organizations like ours and other partners in different networks, such as the National Interagency Working Group, to engage government, to make sure that our response as a country reaches to all people, so that the risk of trying to earn a living does not expose them to infection and further spreading of COVID infection. So this has been a challenge. It has increased our humanitarian response, even within our Children on the Move programming. We now have to provide humanitarian aid in terms of food, which we never used to do because the COVID really impacted income for these families and these girls.
Thank you so much, Nika.
Even hygiene material, simple things such as sanitary pads became very important, Oscar, that it was no more a priority. Girls were not affording those things, so our programming had to be sensitive enough to quickly respond and provide such needs.
Sure. And Nika, I'm sure we could speak another 45 minutes, but our time is running out. But I'm very happy that you could join this conversation and that you finally even appeared on screen. So thank you very much, and thank you for sharing sharing all your thoughts on the report and for this very important work that you've been doing with the report. And Sarah, the same to you. A huge thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
We wrap up here and wish all the viewers a lovely day. And if you thought this was interesting, there will be another talk 6th of October about all the 4 of the reports. And you will see that on Rädda Barnen's Facebook page. Thank you very much.